All right, I think we've got a critical mass. So it's 1:01. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And let's see, I'm just going to double check, Brittany, that we have a quorum. I think we do. Is that right?
Yes, there is a quorum present.
Super. So check in with the members if there are any matters subsequent to posting the agenda. If there are, let us know now.
Jeff, could I break in for a moment, please?
Sure.
Rob Shaw will be attending in place of Tom. So Chris or Amy, can you help him with access?
I just promoted him.
Thank you.
Super, thanks. So not seeing any matters subsequent to the agenda, so let's go and see if we have any public comment. For members of the public, if you want to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature. On my screen, it's at the bottom. And this would be on any matter that's not on today's agenda. I am not seeing hands. And I don't see phones calling in. I think, is that a *9 thing or for phones? But I don't see phones today.
Some reason I can't hear you.
Okay, Tom, we can hear you.
Oh,
Maybe
good.
somebody can
Now I can
text
hear.
Tom. Okay,
Now I can hear fine.
all right. Welcome. So we'll go to item 5, the consent agenda, and this is the minutes from December 14 and a resolution continuing our allowance of video meetings. Does anybody wish to pull an item?
I'll move the item.
Seeing that, so we have Valley moving. Is there a second?
A second.
Silicon Valley is seconding, so let's do a roll call vote on the consent.
I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Did we do public comment on the consent agenda?
Sorry about that. Thank you for checking that. We did not. So let's call for public comment on the consent calendar. Again, use the raise hand feature if you wish to comment. Not seeing raised hands. Okay, now we can do a roll call. Thank you.
Okay, for the consent agenda, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy, I believe is absent, Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda passes.
Thank you. So we'll go to our regular calendar, and I've got the first item. The update on our general manager search. So I want to thank Nick and Lori for helping serve on the ad hoc for the general manager search, and the updates that I have, and I'm happy to ask Lori, and if Nick has joined, I don't see him yet, to add on anything that you feel is useful. The updates that I have is that we have retained about a month ago Tedesco and Associates, a executive search firm, to help us find and do preliminary interviews of candidates. They came highly recommended to us from one of our members, and so far I feel like they're doing a good job. They have been through a pre-screening process with plus or minus about 9 or 10 candidates so far, and we have interviews set up, our first interviews for Friday of this week for a couple of the candidates. We're probably aiming to interview a good 4 candidates, probably from what Tedesco and Associates thinks of as final candidates after discussions with the ad hoc. And the earliest we'd be coming to the board would be for a closed session on February 15 if we can converge on a strong recommendation for a candidate. That is possible, and I do think we're getting some good candidates. The backup plan will be a month later. So unless we have some urgent need to schedule a special meeting, we'll probably use one of the regularly planned meetings for bringing the final candidate to a closed session. And then our goal is to have the negotiation of the contract essentially in a substantially complete form when it comes to the board, but leaving open final details for the board to direct us. And then have the candidate or the final contracted general manager start as soon as reasonably practical. Our hunch is that's probably April-ish, maybe late March, but it could be later for the right candidate. And our current general manager, Tim Haynes, has been delightful to work with through this process, and I'm really grateful in terms of being flexible about his tenure here. And so I think that's the main update, but Lori, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. I think that was a good update.
Okay, so any questions from the board on this process so far? Any curiosities yet? Not seeing any. Okay, let's see if there's any public comment on this update. So a couple more people join. So if you've got public comment on item 6A, the update on the general manager search, please raise your hand. Not seeing any.
Actually, Jeff, I know it's a bit out of order, but I'm wondering, I do have a curiosity in
Sure.
terms of the recruited candidates. I mean, generally, where are they originating from?
So we're obviously seeing a majority from the state of California, but there are several from other states. And that obviously raises the question about how much in-person time there is. And that's one of the conversations we're having with candidates, if they're going to relocate or if they want to stay where they are. And in the days of some video meetings, at least, it may be possible to have some amount of remote time. But just so you can get a taste of what the ad hoc's been expressing, we have been expressing a need for people to be able to be in person in California on a regular basis, but not setting a hard standard that they must reside here. So we're leaving that door open. And if there's input on that, we're all ears, and that can happen as far as direction to us today if you want. But I think that's been a way of leaving the option open for people who might live in another state.
Yeah, and then just one quick follow-up question on that too. In terms of interest area, I mean, are we seeing it from sort of the consultant world? Are we seeing it from the IOU, POU world? I mean, where's
all of the above. And so I feel good that we're reaching the right world of candidates. We are still encouraging more people to apply, and you can still do that too, but time is ticking on that. We want to try and identify the next round of interviews this week. So if you have somebody who has not yet applied, please tell them to apply today or tomorrow, because we're really trying to nail that down. But yes, we're seeing candidates from all of those arenas that you mentioned, which is nice to see.
Yeah, maybe just to add a little bit more background. So we're seeing both publicly owned utility candidates from CCAs, which is exciting, candidates from the private sector, renewable development, consulting, and even the IOUs. So far, very happy with the breadth of candidates that have come forward, but certainly if board members have candidates in mind, again, really encourage you to get them to apply.
great, thank you. I take that as a good sign.
So given the discussion we just had, let me just check for public comment one more time, just to dot our I's. So any other public comment? Okay. No hands. So I'm going to move to item 6B. And in this item, we have two separate items for elections today. In item 6B, we'll consider the election of the chair and vice chair. And then in item 6C, we'll consider the election of the secretary and treasurer. And so I wanted to first take item 6B and ask for nominations. And so this would be the time.
I'm sorry, 6B was the chair and the vice chair.
Correct, yeah.
But if there wasn't an appointment committee or a nominating committee formed, are you just taking it from the floor?
Well, we did discuss this among the current elected members, and I know Mitch has also asked to make a nomination, so I wanted to see if the floor would consider that nomination. So why don't we start with you, Mitch?
Yeah, happy to put the first name into the hat. I think Girish Balachandran, it would be a great person to lead CC Power through the next year and set us up for good results going forward from there, based on his involvement with the strategic plan, his having previously served, and then also going into some of the procurement decisions that we're going to need to make here. So if he accepts, I am happy to nominate Girish.
That's it.
Happy to as well.
Okay, so that's a nomination and a second. And Director Balachandran, is that suitable for you?
Yes, it's suitable for me. And Jeff, how do you plan to do this for chair and vice chair? Have two separate votes, or?
I think so, unless our general counsel advises otherwise. Is that okay?
Yes, 2 votes would be fine.
Okay, so and then I also appreciate that nomination, particularly as we're onboarding a new general manager. I think Girish, you've been materially involved in all the contracts we've negotiated and involved in the strategic action planning, and I think that those 2 backgrounds are going to be important this year. So so I'll be supporting your nomination. And so let's call that question and see if that passes, and then we can move to vice chair. Oh, and public comment first. I saw you coming up. Let's check for public comment on the election of the chair of CC Power. Are there any hands? Not seeing any. So, okay, now let's call that question.
Okay, so this is for the first item under resolution 230102, election of the chair. Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy, I believe it's absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The chair is elected.
And point of clarification, I do see a hand. Let me just, oh, and that's from our newly elected chair. Let me just ask this clarification and just make sure this sits well. So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to finish this meeting as the sort of outgoing chair, or would you like to take over?
I would like you to continue for this meeting, please.
Okay, thank you. And so just so long as our general counsel is okay with that, if you can give me a thumbs up that I can finish this meeting, that'd be great. Okay, thank you. And was there something else you wanted to comment on?
I wanted to make a nomination for the vice chair.
Super, go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Laurie Mitchell to be the vice chair of CC Power.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wish to second that nomination?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second from 3CE. Any discussion on that? I, for one, think it's a great choice, partly because she's president of Cal CCA this year, and I think having her involved will be quite valuable. Let's check for public comment. Any public comment on vice chair? Seeing no hands. Okay, let's call that question.
Okay, for resolution 230103, election of vice chair, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy is absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
yes,
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
yes,
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes,
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The vice chair is elected.
thank you both for being willing to serve. Let's move to 6C. And in this, we'll appoint a secretary and treasurer or treasurer controller. And I think, just so folks know, currently, our general counsel, Brittany Isles, is serving as our secretary. In large part, I think, because that's one of her functions already, is to keep track of all the minutes and make sure we're doing things correctly and accurately. And unless a member feels that we're ready to transition to a board member for that role, I would suggest that we continue to use Brittany in that role. And I did check with her in advance to see if that was acceptable. She agreed. At least until a new general manager has an assistant who's capable of doing those activities. And so I'd like to, I know chairs don't always nominate people, but I'd love to nominate Brittany Isles to continue serving in the role of secretary. And I'd like to get the sense from the board if that's acceptable or not.
I'll second that, Jeff.
Okay, so we have a second. Any discussion or alternate proposals? Okay. So let's check for public comment on secretary. Not seeing hands. So current secretary, would you call the question on the next secretary?
Will do. So for resolution 23-0103, appointment of secretary, Central Coast Community Energy,
yes,
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy, absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
yes,
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
yes,
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes,
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The secretary is appointed.
thank you. And so when it comes to treasurer, I know our dearly retiring director Habashi is probably not going to be an option this year because I think you've got a month and a half left or something like that.
that is correct, yes.
So I want to thank you for your service. And then I also want to find out if anybody wishes to serve in that role. And open it to the floor. This one I don't have a recommendation on, although I do have an ability to serve in that function if no one else wants it, but I'd like to open it up and see if anybody wishes to serve.
I just hear you're willing to serve.
I am.
I think I'm gonna move that right away.
Okay. All right.
I'll second that.
So we have Silicon Valley and a second from Redwood, and I am willing to serve. Does anybody else wish to serve? I don't want to get in the way. All right. Hearing none, let's go see if there's any public comment on treasurer. Seeing no hands, let's call that question.
Okay, for resolution 23-0103, appointment of treasurer and controller, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes,
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy is absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
yes,
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes,
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes,
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The treasurer and controller is appointed.
super, thank you. So our last regular item is a discussion of offshore wind development, and we're going to turn to our director who has had some fairly long power outages and was doing volunteer emergency work for earthquakes recently. So thanks for your service, Matthew. Do you want to lead us in a discussion of offshore wind development?
Yeah, well, and I'll just say thanks, Sonoma Clean Power and also Calpine, who's a vendor for many of us, who provided some funding to the city of Rio Del. That you guys stepped up so much. I'm like, well, we better match what those guys are doing, otherwise we're going to look bad. So we were able to make some epic Costco runs to provide like necessary supplies for people whose homes had been rent tagged and after the earthquake. And then we've had some more excitement, as obviously many across the state have with the weather as well. But so thanks for putting this on the agenda, and I wanted to enable us to have a discussion about it. And so I think as you all know, the auction for offshore wind areas happened off of the Humboldt Coast and the Central Coast, and those areas went for 130, 150 plus $1 million each for those 5 different areas. And so the developers are obviously committed to moving these things forward. And so it seems like offshore wind is a prime candidate for something that we could engage in. And so my thought or proposal or item for discussion would be, if we do want to sort of start looking at that as something we're interested in, that in my mind, I was thinking of, with the long duration storage, we started out with a request for information, just kind of to get like, well, how much, when, so there's obviously a limited pool of developers at this point, although there may be additional areas, and then even maybe the Oregon areas might be a play as far as California, depending on how the transmission stuff gets worked out. And so I was thinking to start getting some more information and using that to we can start putting it into our integrated resource plans and figuring out kind of what might be the future for offshore wind. Tim sent me reminded me of the sort of proposed project development process, which we're at step 0 or phase 0 of kind of conceptualizing the project. And so I wanted to see if others were as interested as we are. Obviously it's something that's near and dear to our heart, because it's in our community.
Matthew, maybe before turning it over to the board, could you've spent a lot more time thinking about offshore wind than I have. Could you say a bit about kind of the reasons why CC Power might be important to be pursuing this? And I'm thinking out loud about the fact that there's a lot of discussion about DWR doing essentially like all the offshore wind procurement. So can you put this in context? Because I know you've been thinking about this.
Yeah, so that's exactly, I think it would be beneficial for us to get ahead of the curve, or at least to be, in the mix as showing that, one, we're interested and that we have the capacity to do it. Because I think, I've gone to a lot of conferences, and something that comes up a lot is like, oh, well, the East Coast is moving along with offshore wind because they have these state mandates and they have centralized procurement, and people will use terms like, oh, well, there's the sort of balkanized procurement in California. So how is this going to happen in California when you've got all these little CCAs? And I always say, hey, we work together well. We even create an organization among some of us to work together, and that that can also bring in other, it doesn't have to be through just CC Power, but I've sort of challenged that narrative, and sometimes I get kind of like, well, we'll see, and I'm like, I'm going to prove you wrong. CCAs can do this. We don't need the state to step in, and if anything, I think we can do it faster and without so much bureaucracy, but so I think maybe there still will be state level policy that hoists upon us some centralized procurement, but I think if at all possible, it would be nice for us to constructively rattle our saber and say, hey, you don't need a state mandate and centralized procurement to make these projects move forward. CCAs can do that, and they can do it better.
That's helpful, thanks. So let's open it up. So do people have reactions and responses or interest in this?
Well, I can jump in. I mean, you folks know that we have been very interested in working with those who have the intention of developing offshore wind to do something along the central coast. We obviously now encouraged, it took about two years after we signed an MOU that said that we will engage in the contracting with one company that was pushing pretty hard on getting a lease. That company didn't get the lease, but somebody else did, so that's fine with us. We'll work with whomever that's planning to build the offshore wind. And I agree 100% with Matt that it's the best way to go at this, especially offshore wind, is to go at it as a group, not as individuals. This is not the kind of thing that would be developed a few megawatts at a time, like solar. This is going to be done on 1,000, 2,000 megawatts at a time. And for us to jump in on our own and try to contract for a piece of it may not be as economical or feasible as it would be if all 10 of us come together. And it is, I think, unless you believe that fusion is going to happen pretty soon, it is the only available option to us that's renewable resource over the next 10 years. So I do encourage this group to really come together and put a solid effort into towards bringing offshore wind to reality on the West Coast.
Thanks. How about incoming Chair Balachandran and then alternate Director Hyams?
Yeah, I think that this is kind of why we created CC Power, the core of wanting to do stuff that each one of us would find difficult to do on our own. So the timing's right. I think it was the governor's first, his budget proposal has a central entity outline. So I think engaging in all those discussions, what can we do as CC Power? Obviously, there'll be some connections with CalCCA also. So totally in favor of moving the discussion forward. And Matthew, is your idea to kind of tee this up for the next meeting or meetings?
Yeah, so that's I maybe look to staff and and obviously we're about to have sort of a transition there, but that's where Tim was like, well, we have sort of phase 0, which is project conceptualization, where staff works with maybe a CCA champion or two to kind of flesh out what we would be doing, and again, I'm kind of thinking ahead to having an RFI. I don't, maybe we're not quite ready to do that or approve that yet, but that seems like sort of a logical first step is just to say, well, tell us what you guys think you could have online by when. So if we were ever to do an RFP, it wouldn't be like before there's projects online and all that. So
yeah, if I may just add one more thing, Jeff. Since this has now become a policy issue also, with the IRP, these procurement orders, and the governor's budget, in our JPA, we said that CC Power would not take a position on policy, except if it's for an asset that we are interested in. So it's just, this would be one of those issues that we want to connect up with CalCCA to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes and that we are coordinated on this. Thank you.
That's a really good
Just a
point.
little,
If you want to follow up on that comment, Tom, go ahead, and then I'll go to.
and perhaps on a previous comment, I'm sorry, Mike, that I'm jumping ahead of you. Just so that you guys know that we do have scheduled meetings with the folks that won the lease here in Central Coast. We have a meeting with those folks already. I think it would be great if this group collectively nominate somebody to take on the initial discussions, at least, or until the general manager comes in, and then we can all delegate that to the new general manager to take on the discussion with those guys to move us forward. But initially, my thinking is we probably need to get some idea about collectively what we would want. That would be very helpful. So one maybe the next meeting or the meeting after, we can just have folks coming in from each member agency to say, assuming that the economics are right and this thing works, we have an interest of so many megawatts. Then at least when we begin to talk to when we begin to talk to the lessor, be prior to the general manager showing up, then we have some idea about what the total interest from that entire group looks like.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mike Hyams.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to express that I really like the idea of an RFI, and I like, CC Power doing this. I think CC Power is the right place for us to explore offshore wind, and I also think an RFI could be a really helpful way to get an understanding of the landscape that Matthew was just referring to, and how CCAs could be part of the solution. And I was just thinking back to long duration storage, and I think CC Power took a leadership role in, issuing, maybe it was pre-CC Power, but it was a group of CCAs working together with sort of the intent of forming CC Power that issued an RFI for long duration storage. And that, of course, then resulted in an RFP in our contract. So I think that's the right place to start. And I think, we support taking that step.
Thanks. Matthew, go ahead.
Do you think it would be sort of premature to basically maybe form an ad hoc committee to work with staff to develop an RFI that could be brought back to the board for a decision of whether we want to actually issue it, or to sort of I'm hoping we can move with a little bit of sense of urgency, because as was noted, it's sort of like it's like churning right now, and there's kind of these proposals, and so it might be helpful for us to not take too long to kind of at least say, hey, we're not ignoring this.
I don't think it'd be premature, and I'm looking to our general counsel to make sure that we have the ability, if I ask people to serve on an ad hoc, is that allowed? We just can't vote on it, right?
Yes, correct. It wouldn't be an action item. It would just be the formation of the committee.
So I'm gonna ask Rob Shaw and Matthew Marshall to serve on an ad hoc until the board has an agenda item to consider other changes. And I hope you're willing to do some thinking about this. And Tom, while you're still general manager, I hope you'll inform Rob about your opinions.
Well, the question that I have
Yes,
is, I'm familiar with the if you issue an RFI, then you get a whole bunch of developers that come in and say, yeah, this is what we can offer to build this over there for this price and so on. And is there expectation that we're going to have a number of developers building offshore wind, or is it just that single developer that managed to win the lease? And I genuinely don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Matthew, you can help with an answer.
Yeah, so there's 5 developers that now have leases. So there's 2 off of our coast and then 3 off the Central Coast, and so there's 5 different developer. I think they're all actually kind of individual developers. And so, I would imagine that, it could be limited to those 5 that actually have site control to start moving forward with projects. So it doesn't, it would be a little bit different flavor than like the long duration storage, because it's a more focused request. And so it might be something a little more streamlined, and like, as I think you said, Tom, and it might be, kind of a lead in to like conversations. And, we obviously want to kind of be appropriately arm's length, but it's a limited pool of potential respondents.
With that being the case, then I'll second the nomination that you just made. Jeff,
Okay,
and have
just
these
because
guys
it's
in.
not specifically agendized, we can't vote on it, but the chair has the outgoing chair has the privilege of asking people to serve.
It's an
As I
unofficial.
understand it.
Yeah, it's unofficial.
So,
Second.
Okay, thanks. Let me
Jeff?
turn to Director
Jeff,
Sears,
this
but
is
also go
Jan.
to Jan following him, because I hear you
Thank
speaking.
you.
Jan. So let's take Mitch first, and then we'll go to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna note well, make two observations. One, the outgoing chair was making the nominations, and that was fairly bold of him, but I respect it. But to Matthew and Tom and Rob, I am curious to know if there are differences between the North and the Central Coast kind of areas, and whether or not we can sort of pull out those differences if they exist through an RFI process. I don't need an answer right now, but just wanted to note if there are fundamental differences, timing wise, development needs. Obviously, transmission is going to be different in those two different areas. So I know that information exists out there. I'm just not privy to it or haven't paid close enough attention, but that would be something that I'd be interested in.
Our area is much nicer, Mitch.
So the answer is yes, very different. And so,
Yeah, thanks.
Let's turn to Director Pepper. You've been patient. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, it's hard to participate blind as it is. We're super interested in offshore wind as well. So I just wanted to support the idea of trying to get out there soon with an RFI and just making it known that CCAs are active and that we're planning to do this and that the state doesn't need to do it. So I think taking action early would be great. And I'd be happy to help on the ad hoc if that's desired. Our coast doesn't have any offshore wind plans, but we definitely have it in our plan to contract for some once it's available.
That's great. Not seeing other hands, so I'll jump in. I too am really interested in one of the things that I'm keenly interested in is the transmission obligations for upgrades for offshore wind for two reasons. One is it's super long lead time and might be the longest lead time element of this. And the other reason is we're trying to build 500 megawatts of geothermal in a region where the transmission might be going right next to. So I have an interest in teeing up the opportunity for CC Power to procure some of those 500 megawatts of new geothermal in our territory. And we're making fairly good progress with our private partners in that so far in terms of getting site control and mapping that opportunity. But I think the transmission aspect is a lot of what's pulling me into this too. So even though that may not be the primary discussion of an RFI, it will be in the background, I'm sure. So I'm also supportive. Any other comments back to Matthew before we go to public comment? Okay, so I think we've provided a clear sense of support for something like an RFI, whether it's an RFI or something else. And then I think if others want to join, because I heard Jan volunteering, if others want to join Matthew and I'm sorry, I just clicked screens and Robert Cha. Let's wait until the next meeting so that we can be clear we're not violating the Brown Act and take that as an official matter, so that it doesn't become a between the meetings kind of decision where 3 or 4 people all want to join. And so with that, I think I will turn to public comment on this item. This is the offshore wind item, and see if anybody has comments. Again, you can use the raised hand feature if you have something to say. And I'm not seeing any hands. So I think that concludes the regular calendar. Let's go to item 7. Are there any, is there any discussion of individual member items? Director Balachandran.
2 things. One is we finished our second prepay deal this morning. It'll close next week for $844 million and achieved a 10% savings. So it'll be about $4.5 million a year of savings. So very glad about that. And I know that there are other deals in the works with other CCAs. Second thing I wanted to say was I wanted to thank Jeff for his service for the last year, CC Power Chair, and I was thinking back on the year, and I think, Jeff, you've accomplished 3 major things, really huge. One is the budget. I have to congratulate Lori for that, heading up that budget task force. Jeff, you put this together and you got us a budget that's going to allow for that second accomplishment, which is hiring a new GM, a full-time GM. So I think that's accomplishment number 2. And then accomplishment number 3, which kind of underlies this, is our strategic plan. So thank you very much for those 3 major accomplishments.
Thanks for those words, and I'm grateful that other people led all of those efforts so that I could preside over them being accomplished. So another thanks to Laurie and to Tim for all of his work and our support from other members too. So thank you. Any other individual member items? Not seeing any. So it is 1:42. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.